Hi, I'm Sheila James Kuehl, and this is Get Used to It. Welcome to the premiere episode of our third season. We have a really good show planned for you today, and welcome back. I'm happy to be back. The show today is about education and gay and lesbian youth and teachers, administrators, and the whole issues about our lives in the schools. There seems to be quite a battleground going on out there about education and about whether or not we'll even be allowed to be visible, whether our issues can be taught or even discussed, whether our lifestyle is a threat to children or perhaps other people's lifestyle is a threat to us. And I'm very pleased to have as my guests today Jeff Horton, who is an openly gay member of the Los Angeles City Board of Education. Welcome, Jeff.
Nice to be here.
It's really good to have you here.
My pleasure.
And Bonnie Castrey, who is a two-term member of the Board of Trustees of the Huntington Beach Union High School District. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you very much, Sheila. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, this is a big subject to cover in an hour, and of course I don't expect that we're absolutely going to do it, but one of the things I wanted to sort of ask you just to begin with is generally what do you think or have experienced is the experience of gay or lesbian or even gay or lesbian friendly students, faculty, administrators, and board members in these various districts, and do they differ among the districts?
In Los Angeles, we've probably been a little ahead of a lot of districts. We've had Project 10, which is a counseling program for gay youths, and we've had some other programs. So I'd say we're a step or two ahead. Basically, though, the experience for most gay youth in our schools and gay staff is the same, though, in that it's a part of their lives that they exclude from school, that they hide in school. And so we're just scratching the surface of making it something that belongs in school as an item of discussion, of recognition. But it's still employees and students, I think, still by and large feel that this is something to keep out of school, and a lot of the public has reinforced that view.
Well, you were a teacher for 17 years, and were you teaching in LA Unified?
Yes, I did.
And was that was your experience too?
Yes, it was, and I mean, it fits with the general being in the closet of most gay and lesbian people still. I was not really out openly gay to my students, and it was a part of my life. Even when I became active in gay educator circles, it was still a part of my life that really didn't belong at school. I mean, I now feel it does belong, and I wish that I had made it belong better, but that was how I felt at the time.
What was the downside, Jeff? I mean, it's not as if I don't know. I went to LA Unified schools my whole life, and though I didn't even think about it at the time, it wouldn't have occurred to me at all to come out. But what was your experience? What was holding you back, do you think?
Well, at high school, it was the reaction of the students. I mean, I saw their anxiety and prejudice about this issue, and so I was afraid of losing credibility with them. And you always sort of have only a tenuous hold on their attention and allegiance anyway, and so to do something that was going to drive them away was a frightening thought. For me, the most poignant regret I have about this is what I was not able to do for some of those clearly gay or lesbian students that I had and that I saw going through such a terrible time and getting such harassment, and I was not really able to do anything for them. And that's my deepest regret on this. I mean, I would have felt better and I would have educated a lot of students if I'd come out, but those few that were really having a terrible time and getting harassed, that's what I regret the most, not being out. And when I go back to teaching, I will be out, and it'll be a different story.
It's hard to go back in the closet when you've been on television
Exactly,
and everything.
right.
But you decided to come out when you were on the school board. Why?
Right.
What was the reason for that decision?
Well, I was really ready to come out, and for all the reasons that we get ready to come out, gay men and lesbians. And I was sort of persuaded not to do it during the campaign, and so shortly after I was elected on Coming Out Day, October 11th, I came out. So there was the personal reason of wanting to be out that those of us who are out have experienced or have heard about. But then there were still all these students, and I'm still thinking of the students that I had and all the students in the district, and how good it would be to have an openly gay school board member. I have since learned how hard it is to filter that information out to them. They didn't all happen to read the LA Times the next day, so I'm still telling them every chance I get.
Well, coming out is a process.
Yes, right.
Like, have I come out to you yet? Have I come out to you yet?
Exactly. So that was the other half of my motive, was not just the personal pleasure of being out, which we know is there, but the providing something, a role model or some kind of security for these students.
So one of the experiences that we have is we're hidden, we're in the closet, we're scared, we figure everybody's going to hate us, and half the time, you know, you do get a lot of harassment. But when some of the students do organize, and they certainly have recently more, then they run into sort of the whole next phase of it. I know, Bonnie, your school district is in Orange County, not that Orange County is the only county of the 58 in California that has some homophobic elements in it, but as a trustee, you ran into kind of a buzzsaw in even being gay-friendly, didn't you?
Yes, I did, Sheila, and I'm still feeling the repercussions of that in the current election cycle. But essentially what happened is that when these young people decided to form a group under the Equal Access Law, there was response from parents in the community, and the parents actually picketed the school. And then
Picketed the schools because the kids wanted to have a gay and lesbian group just to meet?
Yes. And that was carried in the newspapers. And then another group of young students started another organization called the Good Boys Club. And so it was kind of a point and counterpoint, if you will, in terms of the hostilities that were building on the campus. And then the whole issue came before the school board and was
the issue of
heated.
whether the kids would be allowed to meet or not?
Yes. Yes.
And so you had been involved early on in something else about the equal access doctrine.
Yeah, the Equal Access Law was actually passed some time ago by the federal government, and so it is a federal statute that the school boards are governed by. And what happened in 1990 is there was a decision out of the Supreme Court called the Mergen's decision. Jeff, I suspect you've probably read, and I don't know, Sheila, if you have or not, but an interesting decision in terms of saying absolutely that the Bible clubs, Bible groups could meet and other groups could meet as long as certain criteria were met. And among those criteria were that this was not specifically a curriculum-driven course, and so the organization was meeting outside the curriculum, if you will, but that the young people organized themselves, had a custodial supervisor in the classroom, and then they could meet either before school, after school, or during their lunch period, so that it was not during curricular hours. And in 1990, the religious community came to our Board of Trustees and said that they would like very much to have Bible clubs meet. And they were very persuasive in their arguments in that we had key clubs meeting and Kiwanettes and Red Cross blood groups and WTLC groups and all meeting. And why was it that we were not allowing Bible clubs to meet? And I was the board member who said, well, you know, why are we not? If this is a Supreme Court decision, it seems to me that we should look at the decision, that we need to talk with our attorney who advises us regularly, and we need to meet with the religious groups and make sure that what we're doing is both fair and also legal. So we looked closely at the policy, and we actually wrote a policy then that conformed with the law so that all of the groups would come within the protection of the law.
And there was no gay or lesbian group at this point. It was really the religious, and essentially the religious, what we call the religious right or the radical right, that was insisting that this was a right of all students and it should include the Bible study groups.
Yeah. And the strange part about it was, Sheila, that at that 1990 board meeting when we were talking about the actual policy that was finally implemented, I can remember saying at that board meeting with a number of the people in the audience, you know, this even means that the Ku Klux Klan, if in fact they're not doing anything illegal on campus, can meet. And everybody's shaking their heads,
Gee,
yes.
what made you think of the Ku Klux Klan?
I'm not sure.
Right. So they won that fight, and essentially that's a fight by what are pretty much, as they see it, outsiders at that point, fighting for inclusion, right? So now we fast forward 3 years,
and this group of young people, and they, as I understand it, the youngsters are both gay and lesbian, but also heterosexual youngsters who are supportive of the gay and lesbian youngsters. So it was a mixed group of youngsters who got together as a support group. And we're talking together, as I understand it, with each other about what are the issues. Probably, Jeff, much of what you weren't able to talk about. And talking about, you know, their feelings and what was happening to them. And this reaction came from the community in very short time, with the youngsters on the campus organizing, and then the parents picketing. And so they came to the school board meeting in December, and the question before the board was, do we leave the policy in place which provides for the limited open forum under the law, or do we close the forum, which essentially means either all groups can meet as long as they meet the criteria and are not doing anything illegal, or no groups can meet. So I asked the superintendent of schools to find out for us exactly how many groups were on all of the campuses, and there are some 70 groups among our 7 campuses. And I spoke out and said that I think that the limited open forum is working, and that it was my position that we not close the forum.
So did the people who had been arguing for the open forum in '90 in order to get Bible study included, were they now arguing against the open forum because gay and lesbian groups would be included?
A few of them were, Sheila, but most of them were arguing that we should keep the forum with the limited open forum, but we should exclude the Student Alliance from meeting. And their thought processing behind that, as I have tried to understand it, is that there are sodomy laws on the books, and the innuendo was that in fact something illegal was going on our campuses.
So it didn't meet the criteria of the Supreme Court case because it was
something
encouraging illegal activity.
Yes.
So they hadn't actually read many of the laws in California, I guess.
So
very old case books.
Right. And so I stood up for the fair and legal implementation of the policy that we have.
And so you're being punished.
Yes.
And how are they campaigning directly against you on this, sort of using us as you're a fellow traveler or something?
That's a portion of the campaign, but the major thrust of their campaign is around fiscal responsibility, and they're saying that I've been fiscally irresponsible, that our district is in trouble. And
well, you know, it's been interesting to me because there are a number of radical right organizations that you know, meet regularly, as most organizations do, to try to plan a strategy. And one of the strategies seems to be this kind of stealth strategy, because openly targeting school districts and saying we want to have a religious curriculum put in place didn't seem to be working as well, or is it? I mean, do you see a struggle, though in LA Unified it would be maybe more subtle, I don't know. Do you see a struggle in the school districts over just subject matter, and this is an acceptance question, multiculturalism, that kind of stuff, Jeff?
There's some struggle in LA Unified. I think the cities are going to be later in the strategy for these groups. I think they're starting in suburban and rural districts. But in LA Unified, we recognize June as Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, and we've encouraged the schools to do something during that month. And many of them have, and every year for 3 years now we've increased the number. Well, this year we had a little attempt at a boycott of the schools on June 1st to protest Gay and Lesbian Pride Month. And by the scope of the district, 640,000 students strong, it was not successful. But in 3 or 4 secondary schools in certain parts of the city which are very conservative, there was some success. And this was basically organized by groups like those that are attacking Bonnie, many of them outside LA Unified. So it is there. we're not getting the kind of organized effort, I don't think yet, in the city that we're seeing in Orange County and northern LA County and some of the suburban districts. But clearly, the issues are there to be exploited when they get ready and feel strong enough to move in on us, I think.
Well, it seems like we're a ready target in these past couple of decades. The more visible you become, the more of a target you become.
Mm-hmm.
And we're definitely the issue that the radical right is using, for a good deal of fundraising. That's for darn sure.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of education itself, why is it you think this has become such a focus, sort of a place, although I don't think either of you would have thought to make this the battleground about lesbian gay issues, certainly. I don't imagine you woke up one morning and said, oh, I think I'm just going to go in there and, make this an issue. Why, though, why the schools? Why has this become such an important battleground in the larger sort of war about values?
Well, I think if you have a vision of how you think the world should be, as people in the religious right wing do, they have a vision, a clear picture of how they would like the society to be, that gives you the energy and the staying power to adopt a long-term strategy to implement that vision. And that means getting to the education of young people. And to implement in that strategy, you have to wait a while. I mean, you have to wait till, you try and get kids inculcated in a certain attitude and headed in a certain direction, and then it's a while before it all sort of bears fruit in the laws and so forth. So it's a long-term strategy, but it is a powerful strategy, and it needs to be countered with an equally compelling vision, a more compelling vision, it's put in its place. I mean, we can't just operate at the state legislature level and leave the schools to somebody else. And I, as a gay activist, as a gay school board member, a gay teacher, it's become clear to me that I have as much work to do in the gay and lesbian community, persuading us who have been scared away from children and educational issues intentionally, and who kept out of that arena as much as possible. It's as much my job to persuade our community to pay attention to this, that not only are our gay and lesbian kids hurting out there, but all kids are suffering from this. So we have got to get more invested in this and see and have a vision of how we want society to be: open, inclusive, democratic, which is the opposite of what they're talking about, and move forward on this agenda by looking at school districts. What's happening in Huntington Beach Union and other districts in Orange County and North County should be as important to gay and lesbian political activists as senator races, presidential races, because not only are we creating future candidates there, we are affecting the lives and attitudes of children.
I think there's a global perspective on it too, Jeff, and I agree with everything that you've said at this point. But when the pot of money becomes smaller and smaller, and as resources shrink, people tend, I think, to become far more conservative, and they tend then to be able to have someone else feed on their fears. And so for the homophobics in the world, you folks are absolutely wonderful targets, because there aren't enough resources, and so they get into this feeding frenzy almost. And I think 187 is a symptom of that, in terms of, if we throw out all the illegals out of the schools, then we won't be paying to educate them. Well, we would all say, yeah, but we'll probably be paying
for ignorance down the line.
Yeah,
and right, exactly. Well, I think it is true that it's interesting, because the way you can harness hatred, it's almost like the dumbing down of a school population by withholding information, or giving disinformation, which of course is the way I feel about the cultural mythologies about gay and lesbian. But it's interesting too, what sort of tying it together, what you said about keeping us away from children. I always think there's a reason for a cultural mythology beyond the obvious, and to characterize us as sexual predators when everybody knows that the huge percentage of so-called sexual predators are straight men, because that's, if you just look at the rap sheets and the crime sheets, that's the way it is. Still, the mythology about especially gay men is a very useful tactic for keeping them from being teachers, keeping them from being out as teachers, keeping them from, or us from, saying who we are in the school environment. And I had never thought before about the importance of that, sort of that enforced invisibility that's ratified by this mythology.
Yeah. It's not just in schools. I mean, it's in nursing, in pediatrics,
Boy
in child care, in parenting.
Right, parenting.
Well, it's the same reason, I think, and I always link it with the whole issue of gender. I mean, we do put the lie to all the dicta about how boys and girls are supposed to be, because we violate that inherently, I mean, in at least one respect, so in terms of who we are turned on by, if in no other way. So it's hard to maintain a rigid segregation of the two genders if you have these other people, these gay men and lesbians, not to mention bisexuals, in the picture. It just, you can't have a clear division. Boys have to be this way. So, I mean, that's where we attach in terms of what we threaten. And so I think that accounts for when to keep us totally out of the picture when it comes to raising the next generation, which is what we are denied, is the right to participate in that fundamental human activity of raising the next generation.
And I think, Bonnie, your experience in simply thinking that you were acting as a fair and decent human being in supporting democracy and, you know, pluralism, which has sort of been, aren't we built on this rock here, also shows what happens when you align yourselves with a disfavored minority. Because not only do they use us in order to keep the girls being girls and the boys being boys, because if the boys stray, they're called faggot, and if the girls stray, they're called dyke. But if you even do what you think is only fair, you get punished too, for being a sympathizer, I guess. Has that been your experience?
That is my experience. And you know, as we talk about this, the other night at a forum where all candidates were asked questions, I was the only one who was asked the question about equal access, and I was asked that question twice, as if I could have responded any differently the first time, the second time than I did the first time. And so it just came to light for me, Jeff, as you were speaking, that that targeting and that going after really does happen, and that's a very low level of harassment, but that's what's going on.
Well, and you can imagine how the children feel about it, because everything is so exacerbated. When you're young, you have your peer group, and if they don't affirm you, you have nowhere to go. I mean, you can't, it's not your parents, not your community, there is nothing but the schools, which may be the other reason why schools are such an appropriate target, I guess, for everybody. Not only are we really soaking up values in schools when we're kids, but we're so dependent on that arena for just about everything. Because what do we have outside of the schools when we're kids?
And if you look at other civil rights movements, certainly the African American community and the Latino community, and to some extent the women's community, I think they were led more naturally to schools. I mean, there was always a component of the civil rights movement among youth and in the schools. We haven't really achieved that yet, partially because we don't have that generational link that racial groups have. I mean, you can't rely on the parents of gay kids to be their advocates, unfortunately. I mean, we may get to that, and so I think that's part of why we haven't gotten involved in the struggle in the schools, although it is beginning, and what is going to really push it forward are the young people in the schools themselves, the gay and lesbian young people who, emboldened by an adult movement, not so much paying attention to them as other things, but still emboldened by that, they're going to start demanding their rights. And that, as happened in Huntington Beach, that's what's going to drag us all into this, I hope.
We're going to take a break just for a minute, and I want to come back to the theme of sort of the connection to other movements and also what positively we do and can do in the districts and in the individual schools. So don't go away, we'll be right back.
At first, we didn't know what to think.
He said he was gay.
We thought we had done something.
I was so angry, so hurt.
We didn't know where to turn.
Talking to other families at Parents' Flag was a lifesaver.
Now we're closer than ever.
She's the same daughter she always was.
We love him just as much as always.
Parents' Flag helped us through it.
You are not alone. talk to us. We understand. For the Parents Helpline nearest you, call 1-800-4FAMILY.
Here's one time it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. Here's the other. Life's too short. Stop the hate.
Hi, welcome back to Get Used to It. I'm Sheila James Kuehl, your host, and today we're talking about gay and lesbian youth and teachers and school districts and education and all of the issues that combine our community and the struggles and the joys, etc., and schools. And I talked to Jackie Goldberg, who is an openly lesbian member of the Los Angeles City Council, who was a member of the LA Unified School District Board, about these issues in City Council chambers. So first of all, what's the experience of gay and lesbian children and teachers in the schools?
Well, it's still pretty negative. Most kids are still closeted, heavily closeted. Even the kids they hang out with don't know they're gay. And they do that because there's still a barrage of fag jokes. It's still okay on the sports fields in particular, but just about anywhere else. And so there's just a very large amount of kids and teachers in hiding. Teachers no longer fear they'll lose their jobs, at least in a school district like Los Angeles Unified, but they still fear harassment. And we've had teachers harassed by students, with principals unwilling to step in and provide protection for the teacher. We've had teachers harassed by other teachers. We've had teachers harassed by administrators. We've had kids harassed by all of the above and provided very little or no protection. And this is in a school district that's had some intense efforts on this area. So you know that in places where there's no support at all, it's much worse. Now, I don't want to say it hasn't gotten better, because that's not true either. The fact that we can have a gay prom, the fact that we have Project 10, the fact that when my last year of teaching, which was a couple of years ago, before I came on the school board, actually a year and a half ago, a kid came out on Friday Forum in my class in front of all of his peers, and you know, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop when he did it, but he got tremendous support from those kids.
What happens to kids who come out?
Well, it depends on the setting. The young man who came out in my class was embraced by his classmates, found out that one other of his classmates was gay that nobody knew about. And I think where you have a group of friends that are really good friends and supportive, teenagers are probably better off coming out. It's the kid who's tended to be isolated behind being gay or lesbian that really has a tough decision, because coming out may just exacerbate the isolation. And that's when we get kids who end up with substance abuse or even suicidal ideation. And that's, we have a higher than average suicide rate for gay and lesbian kids in this city, in this country, because at some point they are so isolated, family isolation, school isolation, they just feel like if anybody were to find out, I'll die.
And LA Unified's taken some steps about
Yes.
this, haven't they?
Well, the support the school district gives to Project 10 is a very important step.
And tell a little about Project 10.
Project 10 is a counseling program, which is believed by some Republicans to this day in the state legislature to be recruiting people into the gay lifestyle, which I think is always one of my favorite things that the right wing says about lesbians and gays, is that you could recruit somebody with our great wide acceptance and love
Right,
and high
sure.
esteem in which we are held in this society is a really good recruiting tool to get people to come into a hated group. I think that's really a tough sell, actually, if you were going to recruit people. But be that as it may, it is a counseling program that was started by Dr. Virginia Uribe at one high school, Fairfax High School. It's now spread to most of the high schools and most of the middle schools in the district, which simply gives young people an opportunity to explore their own sexuality with a counselor, confidentially, their parents' sexuality, because we got a lot of kids whose parents are gay, and or they're just their feelings that, gee, I don't know, I have these feelings for this boy and I'm a boy, does that make me homosexual? Or for a girl with a girl. And it's an opportunity to explore these things in a safe and confidential environment.
I can go now to a lesbian or gay prom. I can take my partner, I can feel totally comfortable.
Right.
But it's the other prom, it's an alternative prom.
Right.
I'm not going to my own.
Right.
What do you think about that
Well,
approach?
I think we're moving, I think that's a step in the direction of being able to go to your own prom at your own school. I mean, that's the ideal. It's always nice to be able to go where you're completely safe and comfortable, so you may have both. You may not eliminate one to do the other, but right now it's a major step. So I support the separate prom, but I also support saying to those principals and activity directors and senior class sponsors, what are you doing to make it possible for lesbian and gay kids at your school to feel comfortable coming to their own prom right here at X High School?
In the recent past, we've seen an explosion of right-wing fundamentalists, of radical right conservatives running for school boards. And everybody's talking about it as a tactic for the right wing. Have you seen this, and if so, why would they switch their focus in a sense?
I don't think they ever did. You see, for a very long time, the right wing were the only people on school boards. It's only as some of us in the 50s, late 50s, 60s, and 70s said, hold it. No. Schools can't be the captive of one ideology here. It's got to be more, integrated into looking at all of the various needs of kids and cultures. So more of people like myself began to run for school board, and then the right wing found itself largely losing seats. And now it's in the process of trying to recapture what it didn't ever have to even work for. They were mostly uncontested races.
Now, do you think, finally, that it's been important for you to be visible? I mean, out and active, and also active in a number of sort of making connections between communities and between oppressions.
Right.
I
think it's important. I think anybody who is lesbian or gay or bisexual should be out unless it's dangerous physically to them, or unless the costs are beyond what they could bear. Something Dr. Uribe taught me is it's a continuum. You do not have to go hold a press conference with the LA Times to be out. Just pick a target or a goal each week, each month, each year. Tell one more friend that you know is a friend of yours. And if you do things in increments, I think that most people will find that they may have at first only a corner of their life where they don't have to hide. But I do think we're headed in the right direction. And kids are becoming more accepting. They really are. People are being more sensitive. Not fast enough for anybody's taste, certainly not mine, but I do see a positive trend in where a system like Los Angeles Unified is going.
Welcome back to Get Used to It. Today, as I indicated, we're talking about education, and my guests are Jeff Horton, who is a member of the LA Unified School Board, openly gay member, and Bonnie Castrey, who is a trustee of the Huntington Beach Union High School District. Welcome back. We were talking about a whole range of subjects, I think, around education, but before our break, we were talking about, I think, kind of the relationship between this sort of gay and lesbian issue as a civil rights issue and other civil rights issues. And I remember you saying, Jeff, about how parents have been deeply involved in sort of bringing to light the issues of other students or groups of students, but that it's more difficult for gay and lesbian students because often we don't have gay or lesbian parents going in there and saying, yeah, this is what my family is like. But it seems to me that the restrictions, kind of, or not wanting the issues to be aired, is very similar to what it's been like for other civil rights groups. I mean, the African American students could not have felt comfortable in schools, certainly when I was going to school in the 50s, to see how invisible they were in history and social studies and government and all that stuff.
Every social movement has a sort of a dimension in the schools, and you know, with the African American movement, it was to see that the curriculum reflected African American interests and achievements, to see that school practices and activities reflected the interests of African American students, to see that all these dimensions of the African American community were represented in the schools, even as the movement was fighting in congresses and legislatures for the legal parts of their demands. And similarly with gay and lesbian issues, we need these dimensions that are in the schools. But we have to rely on the broader community more than on just parents of gay and lesbian kids because because we can't always rely on them. So we have to call upon all these childless gay men and lesbians who have been such great uncles and aunts to get involved in their schools in some way on behalf of gay and lesbian kids they don't even know and may never meet.
Although, you know, we're pretty visible now as parents more and more in what they've been calling the gay boom, I guess. A lot of friends adopting, or a lot of lesbian couples having children, etc.
Yes.
But, well, you were talking about sort of the issue of students being able to meet on campus, which is one aspect of visibility. But what about the curriculum? Isn't there a big struggle around the curriculum? How about in your school district, Bonnie?
There is a struggle around curriculum, and in my school district, it hasn't come to the fore at this point in time. We still are teaching through the health curriculum, and the biggest fight that we're having is the abstinence issue. And the phone calls that I've been getting during this particular campaign are around, if I'm not willing to only teach abstinence and to have the curriculum reflect that there are in fact ways that if a student decides not to remain abstinent, that they can protect themselves from pregnancy and disease and everything, that they won't vote for me. And that goes right back to that same movement. I mean, there's a whole core of issues, Sheila, that go back to the extreme right.
Well, the federal law's, in a sense, been kind of taken over by that, where it's my understanding the federal law requires that as an aspect of the health education, if sex education is taught, that abstinence must be taught as the preferred method of birth control, if you like, or of, you know, that no sexual activity is sort of the preferred approach, though schools are allowed to teach about other aspects of sexuality, are they not?
I think everybody agrees we all agree that we would caution young people to be cautious about starting sexual activity. The question is whether you then allow for the fact that they're going to make up their own minds, and that's a key point, because this abstinence-only curriculum doesn't take into account even the possibility that they'll make a decision contrary to what we're advising them. And obviously they're going to, so this abstinence-only really just, if you make a decision other than what I've said, then you're not even in my picture here. You know, you're totally off the...
Well, but that's sort of the essence of the struggle, isn't it? Whether, in the larger sense, whether students are taught critical thinking, or whether they are taught the rules.
Right. Exactly.
And that's always been the struggle of education.
Yes.
It's not only American education. There must be the theory from the earliest, you know, chips
Socrates,
on stones.
right,
Yes, Socrates before Socrates.
Yes.
Probably some people who were living in caves were trying to decide, you know, do we tell them the truth, and let them make it up for themselves, or do we tell them what we want them to believe?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a struggle. When we call it right wing, I think in a lot of cases we do mean that part of the populace that wants people to follow a prescribed path relatively unquestioningly.
Yes.
And that makes us, because we are outsiders, we are path breakers by virtue of having been marginalized through all of history, in essence. And it seems to me that it makes us a danger as creative thinkers. I mean, we are artists and poets, and, you know, sort of the creative minority. You think, oh, that's where you find all those gay men, and lesbians are in the social movement saying things have got to change, systems have got to change, justice is injustice. Those are both very dangerous poles, I think, of thinking for yourself. And I can imagine when you combine that with the fact that when people think about lesbian or gay people, they think about sex, that's what we're about. And that is such a taboo subject, maybe because it's such a core part of individual identity. you know, that we become a danger on all of these thresholds. So what does a district or a school or an individual teacher or student do to counter this?
Well, I think it's sufficient to really act on and believe in the premise that the school should be safe and welcoming for all students, that all kinds of activities and guarantees flow from that. And it means, for example, that you have to look at every student and at every group of students and say, do they feel safe and do they feel welcome here? And if not, what do we have to do to see that they are? Part of that is simply eliminating harassment and persecution. Part of that is seeing that they are acknowledged by the school, that they have activities that meet their interests, that the curriculum has them in it, so they feel, whether they're a racial minority, an immigrant, a woman, whatever, that they feel connected to the curriculum. All that comes from believing that this school is for every child, and we're going to meet every child's needs, both individually and in the groups that they come in. And that's the basic premise, and if we believe that and act on it, we're going to be led to all kinds of things that are going to make it come true for gay and lesbian kids as well.
And Jeff, do you find that, I do, at least from a board perspective, that when I look at all of our board policies in terms of access, and I don't mean the equal access issue, but in terms of how people access whatever it is that's going on, be it our safe, secure schools, which is a #1 priority on all of our campuses, making sure that kids have peer mediation programs so that they can learn listening skills and begin to work together. I mean, all of these activities begin to break down those barriers. They create an environment in which critical thinking takes place. But my sense is that it's those critical thinking skills that are really being attacked. It's because we're saying you don't go to school for a prescribed set of somethings, the rules, that we then get into trouble as educators and as board members, because we're saying it's okay for the kids not to agree with us, as long as they've got a rational reason for that.
Yeah, I think that is at the heart of it. I mean, we're talking about a movement here which has, as you said, as its premise that you follow the rules. You get handed a set of rules and you follow them, whether it's the Bible or whatever. You're given a set of rules, you follow them. If we then teach you should question whatever you get, come to your own conclusion, consider the rights of others, consider everybody's interests, learn to work with others, and learn to come to a conclusion then together with others, that's a very different animal, and that is what you run up against ultimately. But when you get it to that point of definition, at least everybody knows what's at stake, that we have people who believe in democracy and pluralism and people who don't, and that's the decision.
Well, that was a big struggle with the class test, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, the concern, as I understood it as a layperson with the class tests, was that students were asked open-ended questions like, well, what do you think about this? Or can you think of a circumstance in your life where someone let you down? And the right wing apparently thought that that was too much trying to find out about what was going on in their families.
Well, and asking them to think. I mean, the alternative was, here's a set of questions, there's right answers, there's wrong answers. If you don't give the right answers, you fail. As opposed to, here are open-ended questions, we're going to judge how you think, how you attempt to answer, can you be coherent, that kind of thing.
I guess it just depends on what you think people are supposed to do when they grow up. I mean, maybe that's the essence. It may be stating the obvious, but the essence of why the schools are at the center of this struggle. Because it's not just about what you experience in school. It's, as you said, it is investing in the long term. Schools are investing in the long term. We talk about our young people, but it's not just making them happy today or making them smart today. It's in a sense, what are we building for California? What are we building for the future? And I suppose if you have a populace that you can get a knee-jerk response from by simply using a trigger word like immigrant, for instance, then in essence I think the education system may have let us down. Although it is interesting when you see, as more information gets out, whether it's on the initiatives or whether it's on any subject matter like gay and lesbian people, people are much more thoughtful. When I was going through my campaign and going door to door, I would never get very far because I'd always, oh sure, I'd love to come in for some lemonade and talk endlessly about issues. And the voters are not into sound bites. Frankly, individually, they're not. The problem is, of course, we don't have time to have lemonade with every single voter and say, let's explore how complicated these issues are. But generally, people are hungry for information. And so I think that when students are given the chance to make these kinds of critical decisions, they feel better about the process. They may even come to the same conclusions that the right wing wants them to come to. It's not a foregone conclusion. Frankly, what I think liberals and progressives always risk is that we allow people to come to decisions and we may not like them. They may decide they hate lesbian and gay people, you know. But you've got to trust that sort of liberty notion, that freedom notion. So what else have the school districts done, specifically in the area of perhaps helping lesbian gay students or teachers or gay-friendly parents, teachers, and administrators to sort of work in a more open atmosphere? Sort of how do you counter this stuff?
Well, I think you just hammer away at the equal access issue. I mean, you just say, we got a group of students here that need something, how can we provide it? When we first introduced this, I was a teacher at the time, when we first introduced it at the National Education Association in '88, a position that would have said all students deserve the right to counseling on sexual orientation issues. That was appealing to the educator in people and asking them to put aside any personal attitudes they have, but to come forward as an educator and say, this is a kid in need and we're going to have to do something. And if you let yourself be driven by that in advancing the cause of gay and lesbian students, I mean, you win a lot that way, as opposed to this is the gay adult community's agenda or something. That is a red herring, and I've had many debates on this. What I found is if I stick to, we got a group of kids, they get yelled at, they get called names, they get harassed. What are you going to do? I mean, what can we do about them? Forget me, forget all these people marching and everywhere. What about these kids? We got to do something for them. They got a right to come to school, to go to class, to pass their class, and not to fear going home and come to school every day. You tell me how we stop the harassment. And once you get people down that path, then you can take them to all kinds of things, curriculum, activities, and so forth.
One of the ways that came to my attention right after the equal access issue was reinforced in our district, and we kept our policy. It did not go away, so we still have the limited open forum. But shortly after that, the dress code came forward, not for uniforms, but for a dress code that looked for making sure that there was compliance and not gang regalia and all on the young people, and not baggy pants so that they couldn't hide weapons and things. And it was brought to our attention at a board meeting that in fact we had said about t-shirts that they shouldn't be anti-Christ and they shouldn't have religious overtones and all, but that we had said nothing at all about sexual orientation. Immediately put it into the dress code. Now, that's one place where the board can have impact in terms of setting the whole tone for a safe environment for students.
So you couldn't have a t-shirt that was itself a form of harassment, like,
I hate you,
death to all faggots or whatever.
That's right.
On the other hand, you couldn't have one that says, nobody knows I'm a lesbian, right?
Well, who does that harass?
Well, it doesn't seem to harass anyone, although I think there was some notion that, these outrageous arguments are made that you invade my privacy by making me face the fact that you're gay or something, and these arguments, I think, are not sort of based in good legal theorem. You said something, Bonnie, that was interesting to me too. You're a lifelong mediator as your profession, and in terms of sort of conflict resolution, because it seems to me that where the adults are out there sort of shouting at each other and trying to essentially unelect you and do all of these things at that level, I find that the students themselves, for the most part, are very troubled about all of this shouting, and would really rather see if there's not some way to work through some of these conflicts. And I wonder whether mediation techniques are used on the campuses to kind of defuse some of this stuff, as well as to educate.
We are using them, and actually we're using peer mediation techniques, Sheila, where we first are going in and teaching teachers the techniques so that they can integrate conflict management skills into the curriculum, because it's applicable in many areas of curriculum, and then teaching students to mediate. And at a number of our schools, we have students who have now graduated, gone on both to college as well as into jobs, and called back and said that they're starting mediation programs in their jobs. So I mean, it's a lifelong skill that makes sense. It teaches good listening habits. It teaches you how to get to the issue and then find out what people's interests are.
It's so important to teach people how to operate in a peer environment, because that's what democracy is assuming we're all in a peer environment and operating. And so to teach students to operate with peers as opposed to operate with authority is a very important distinction. And there's plenty of authority over students. I mean, there's no lack of that. So to begin to introduce elements of peer power and working with peers to solve problems, it's a basic democratic skill. You've got to have it.
It's interesting, too, because there was a conference not long ago called Listening to Generation X that I was invited to, and the notion was that elected officials would go and sit at a table with 10 young people and not say a word, and listen. And topics were given or assigned or drawn for the table. And it was very thoughtful. And I walked into that room, and it was such a rainbow. And it wasn't just a 4-color rainbow, sort of like you see, but even, you know, the Asian component was itself a rainbow. And it was a rainbow in terms of sexuality, too. I mean, there were children and young people who identified as gay or lesbian or bisexual, or, you know, who just hung out with people who were, because it was the whole notion of breaking down these very rigid lines seemed to be a big part of what Generation X was really interested in. And I found them fascinating and you know, very smart and motivated, not at all having given up, you know, on anything, very vocal.
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me was that it was an adamant part of the rainbow, that gay or lesbian people, where it wasn't just about color, it was about, the rainbow was a larger notion to them. And they said they thought their generation was more integrated, more multicultural than any that had come along, partly by virtue of the fact they have to be, and the schools are more mixed than they've ever been.
2 years ago, when we had Gay Pride Month, there was a lot of controversy at the district level, and one reporter went to a number of high schools and talked to kids there, and the difference between all the controversy that had played out on the talk shows and everywhere, and all these kids saying, what's the big deal? I mean, of course we have some here, we think they should be part of it, I mean, we're not worried at all. We had recently in Los Angeles, we had our second annual Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Youth Conference, and had over 300 kids this year, increase over last year, come together for a day at Occidental College, and it was a similar rainbow. Now these were all gay or lesbian or bisexual kids, but they were their own rainbow, and spent the day talking about careers and their future and all kinds of things. A very empowering thing. That's why I say what I said earlier, which is these young people are going to pull all of us along after them.
Well, and what about the prom? I mean, the interesting thing, LA Unified has a whole commission essentially devoted to gay, lesbian youth issues, right?
Yes.
And had a prom
last year,
where people could bring their significant others or dates or whatever, and if they were gay or lesbian. Now, but Jeff, what do you think? I mean, this is a thing where you have to go to the prom somewhere else instead of with your friends?
Well, we would all like to get to the point where same-sex couples can come to the high school prom and feel comfortable. Of course, we want to get there. I don't think we're there in most high schools. Most kids would like to go to their high school prom. But beyond that, they want to go to a prom with someone that they are turned on by, I guess. I mean, I went to my prom, but it was a sort of platonic experience. Enjoyable, but platonic. You know, I would have loved to go to prom with someone that I was turned on by, you know, a romantic date. And so that's why we had this prom. And kids came from all over Southern California, because this not being able to go to the prom with someone, with your honey, with someone you're sweet on, is what a loss, you know, to kids. And that's something that a lot of people don't even think about, what a gay and lesbian kid might miss and how that might affect them. So we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to also keep pushing for the proms and dances at the schools to be friendly to all kids.
Jeff, you said something that triggered for me the whole issue of people don't think about it. I think not only do people not think about it, what came out in our hearings in December and January from the adult population was somehow if we continued to have the young people deny their gay and lesbian rights, that then they would somehow turn their heads around and become heterosexual.
Right. Right. Again, just a refusal to face reality.
But it was like if the adults deny it, then the kids will follow.
It's connected with their view on the abstinence. I mean, we're just going to deny that they might choose to be sexually active. We're just going to act on the assumption that they'll all follow this rule. I mean, it's know-nothingism, pure and simple.
Well, it also, I think, is a part of a larger strategy that has been kind of effective, if you think about it. If you make someone invisible enough, if you make them feel ashamed of themselves or what they are or might be, it can help. The pressure is supposed to change behavior. And it seems to me that the interesting thing about lesbian and gay people, and especially young people, is that it really doesn't. It forces you into a closet. You may feel ashamed, but you are still lesbian or gay because it is such an essential part of who you are, and I think the kids really know this. So it seems as though this strategy, though it is used often to make people feel ashamed of who they are and change, and either assimilate or hide, is really a losing strategy. I mean, I feel very hopeful about the work that you both do, because in essence you open the door of the closet a little bit and you say, we know you're going to be the way you are anyway, and we love you, come on out. And it is, I have to say, it's an essential part of saving the lives of our kids who have a much higher suicide rate than kids who are not gay or lesbian, or who don't think they are. Even some of our kids aren't sure. So I want to thank you very much for your work, and I want to thank you very much for being on the show. We've just come to the end of our time, and it's been a fascinating discussion. I hope that you will get involved in your local schools if you have kids, or if you don't. This is about us, about our state, about our country, and about our lives. And I know that you know that gay and lesbian people are there, and that gay-friendly people are there, and what we say to you always every month, get used to it.